Hi everyone and welcome back. I'm Mindy Eggen. In today's video, I am going to be doing a modified postage collage card using some new products from Gina K Designs. The stencil that I'm going to be using is called Dazzling Dahlia. This is a part of the card kit that is currently available for November 2024, but you can use any stencil like this that you may have in your stash. I'm going to take a craft tacky mat and place it down onto my work surface, and this is going to hold my cardstock and my stencil in place for me. So I am using a piece of layering weight white cardstock cut to 4¼ by 5½. I'm going to place the first layer of the stencil over the cardstock, and I'm kind of tilting it because I want it to be at an angle. The main thing I was really looking for with this particular stencil is I wanted it to fill up a majority of my card front. So this first layer, which has the most open areas of the stencil, I am going to ink blend on Peach Bellini. So I am going to turn this into a Christmas card, but of course this could be used for any occasion. So I'm just going to go over the entire background, making sure to go in left to right and right to left to get complete coverage. I'm going to just peel away that first layer of the stencil, bring in stencil number 2, which is going to add some detail layers to my flower. And then I'm going to be using Cherry Red from Gina K Designs. All of my supplies will be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. So I will continue ink blending until I have that entire portion covered. And now when I peel away the stencil, it's gonna look a little funny at first. So this is gonna look like this until we continue filling in the image with the greenery and really completing the scene for it. So just bear with me. I'm bringing in the third layer of the stencil, which is going to be the most open areas or the largest open areas for the leaves. For this, I started out with a light spruce. Now, the second layer for the leaves, we're going to add some more detail to it. It's one of the reasons I love Gina's stencils so much is just by using the layers that they provide already has amazing detail, but I am going to step it up just a little bit. Now, for this second layer, I am bringing in medium spruce, and I want to step this portion up a little bit. I kind of wish I would have thought of this when I was doing my color selection for the flower, but I didn't think of it right away. So I'm going to leave this stencil in place, and I'm going to bring in dark spruce, and I'm using a smaller blending brush to add just a little bit more contrast to the leaves, because once they kind of start getting tucked under the flower, they're going to add a little bit more of a shadow. And I really love how that came out. So I am going to carefully just peel this up from my craft tacky mat, and I'm going to bring this over to my Misti stamping tool, which also has another sticky mat in it to hold my cardstock. So I'm moving that over to kind of place it more towards the center of my Misti tool. Then I'm bringing in the Elegant Script background, one of my favorite type of background stamps. I know everybody kind of does this different. I like to use my Misti tool, especially with this particular technique I'm going to do because I want to stamp it multiple times. So I place this over my card panel and I'm going to ink it up with a white pigment ink. What this is going to do is add a little bit of interest to the flower because you can't really read the script. I don't even think it's legible, honestly, but it is going to add a little interest to the petals. Plus, that white pigment ink is going to kind of draw back those bright colors just a little bit. So if you thought the peach Bellini and the cherry red was a little too drastic, this actually will help kind of dim that down a little bit. And honestly, I think it just looks really super cool. So I'm going to ink it up again to have that be a little bit more prominent because of that cherry red. It is going to take me multiple times to stamp it to get it to stand out a little bit. So I think I end up stamping this about 3 times. You could also try this with maybe a light craft type of ink or even an ivory pigment ink, I think would be really pretty. Because pigment ink stays wet a little bit longer, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to dry this with my heat tool. I want to die cut this panel, but I want to make sure my ink is dry first. To do my die cutting, I am going to be using the Master Layouts 14, and this is the Postage Collage die. So I'm lining this up over my image, trying to get as much of the leaves and petals in there as I possibly can. I'm going to hold it in place with Post-it tape, and then I'm going to run this through my Intri-Cut die cut machine. So I have it kind of tilted at an angle there. It's going to just run through the machine a little better when you have your dies tilted at an angle like that. While I had my die cutting machine out, I also went ahead and die cut out the cherry red cardstock using that same die. And now here is where the modification comes in. So on your die or on your die cut panel, you see there is a stitched line that goes around your design. I am going to trim inside of that stitched line. So really what I'm doing is cutting these into their each individual squares and getting rid of that postage edge and also those perforated areas. But I'm also going right up next to that stitched line. So it'll be just a nice clean shape. I don't want to say square because some of them are kind of more of a rectangle shape, but there's not going to be any stitching or perforated lines on each individual piece. One helpful tip I want to share is that as you're die cutting these into their individual pieces, put them out on your desk and lay them out just as they would be. It's going to be a lot easier when you go to put these on your card front. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I wanted to pop all of these pieces up, and I found this was the best way for me to do it. Going inside of that stitch line is going to kind of give it a little separation. When I go to the cherry red cardstock, you'll see here in just a minute. Now here, I'm just laying it all out, making sure I have it in the right order. And then I'm going to bring in my cherry red cardstock that I used that same die cut panel for the Master Layouts 14. Make sure it's flipped in the right direction and start kind of lining these up, making sure that they fit properly inside of those stitch lines. I love this because it has that separation. I can pop these up to give it a little bit more dimension, and we have that really subtle interest of the background stamp. Now I'm going to be taking some of those individual pieces and I am going to be adding some stamped images from the Postcards and More stamp set, another one of my favorite sets. This has a lot of classic postage type of images on here. So I started out with the postmark. So I'm using my stamping tool to do this one. It's a little bit bigger of a stamp and plus there's kind of two pieces to go with it. Everything else I'm going to be using a comfort block and some Versafine black ink. Now, one of the reasons I decided to be using the Versafine black ink is because I have so much going on that background the way it is, and I have a white pigment ink on there. So I wanted to make sure that the ink was really going to stay on top of everything. I laid out the stamped images that I want to use and the direction I want them to go. So I have those laid out, and then I'm just grabbing them, picking them up with the block, and stamping them, making sure to put them back in their position that I had them in so I don't lose track of that. I do have my tidy towel off on the side so I can clean and put it away as I go so I don't lose any of these small images. I think this is such a really fun modification to the postage collage as being able to have that separation between the colored cardstock, my stamped background, and just adding that little bit of lift. So now I can go through and I am adding just thin foam squares to the back. I'm not adding a ton of dimension to them, just a little bit. I will remove the backing on each of those and using my reverse tweezers, I'm going to start filling them in. Anytime I take those squares off, I always keep them in the order that they need to go on that background because one little slip up and it's going to throw everything off. And I really wanted to make sure the image still stayed complete. So I'm going through, I'm just removing the backing of each of those. You could always add a little bit of Connect glue to the back if you're a little nervous about going right to the card front with your foam square. The liquid glue would give you a little bit of wiggle room to slide that in place. There's also another die on the Master Layouts 14 that I die cut using white cardstock, and that adds a little bit of a border and a stitched edge. So I added tape runner to the back of my red cardstock and then placed that on that white stitched panel. For this one, I am going to be using some foam tape. This isn't super thick and it isn't super thin. It's one of my favorite foam tapes because it's just the perfect height or depth of foam tape. Then I can go ahead and add that to a piece of cardstock cut from Peach Bellini that is measured 4¼ by 5½. Now for a sentiment, I did want this to be a Christmas card, and I am using a sentiment from the Holiday Floral Bundle set. I was digging around trying to find an extra one that I might have foiled. I couldn't find it, so I just went ahead and stamped it with black Onyx ink. I am die cutting it out with the coordinating die. And then I also die cut out two more to layer together with liquid glue to, again, kind of create that dimension on the front of the card. and then I don't have to trim out little pieces of foam squares. Then I can go ahead, add that to the front of the card. I'm placing this up more towards the center, which I know does cover the flower a little bit, but I feel like everything is kind of drawing your eye into the center to the sentiment. Now I have one more idea that I want to share with you. This was a design I was playing around with in blues. So I did like powder blue and I think blue denim. I didn't finish the card because there was such a gap up at the very top. So that's why I redid it and decided to go with the reds. But that does give you some color inspiration to use in your card projects. So that is my idea for the modified postage collage. If you haven't tried this yet, I encourage you to give it a try. It's a lot of fun and I think it just looks really neat. Again, all of my supplies are listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon.